The SLEDGER has received a complete rework, greatly buffing its stats, giving it a fresh design, a new passive ability, and much more. It has also come back as a limited time game pass, costing 749 Robux. So in this video, I'll be taking a close look at its stats, values, and uses, then give my personal ranking of how good it is. And let me just say, it's gotten a lot better. But before we start, the Corso Plushie is back, now in an adorable Santa outfit. I love the way its design turned out, and it's only going to be around for 3 more days before it's gone forever. So make sure you get one of your own before it's too late. Also, the first 200 supporters will get an exclusive Christmas Corso roll icon in my Discord, and due to very popular demand, like literally hundreds of comments, if we sell 400 plushies, I will do a Corso ASMR video. And anyone who bought the plushie will be able to suggest and vote on the topic of the video. Anything goes, as long as it's, not inappropriate. There's a link in the description to buy the plushie, and thanks to Makeshift for making this possible. Anyways, let's get back to the video. Displacement cost increased from 800 to 950 cash, making it slightly harder to get in the early game. At these earlier levels, it still works the same, having a short range and slow attack speed. It attacks in an arc, being able to hit multiple enemies at a time. It also applies a chill effect, slowing and freezing enemies at later levels. At max level, it gets a new frost aftershock ability when attacking, but we'll take a closer look at that when we get there. Also, its placement limit stayed at 6. At level 0, its swing rate decreased from 1.75 to 1.2, its slowness per hit decreased from 30 to 15%, its maximum slowness decreased from 80 to 45%, its max hits increased from 1 to 2, and its DPS went from 4.57 to 6.67. At level 1, its total cost stayed at 1,350, and its damage decreased from 15 to 12, its swing rate decreased from 1.75 to 1.2, its slowness per hit decreased from 30 to 25%, its max slow decreased from 80 to 45%, its max hits increased from 2 to 3, and its DPS went from 8.57 to 10. At level 2, its total cost decreased from 3,600 to 3,000, and its damage increased from 20 to 25, its swing rate decreased from 1.5 to 1.2, its slowness per hit decreased from 30 to 25%, its max slowness decreased from 80 to 45%, its max hits increased from 3 to 4, and its DPS went from 13.33 to 20.83. It also gets lead detection. At level 3, its total cost decreased from 7,350 to 6,200, and its damage increased from 40 to 45%, its cooldown decreased from 1.5 to 1.2, its slowness per hit increased from 60% to 30%, its max slowness decreased from 80% to 60%, its max hits increased from 3 to 4, and its DPS went from 26.67 to 37.5. It now also freezes enemies once they reach max slowdown. This freeze time has been reduced from 2 seconds to 1.5 seconds. At level 4, its total cost decreased from 14,850 to 14,450, and its damage increased from 60 to 75, its cooldown decreased from 1.5 to 1.2, its range increased from 7 to 7.5, its slowness per hit decreased from 60 to 45%, its max slowness decreased from 80 to 65%, and its DPS went from 40 to 62.5. Its freeze time was also reduced from 2 to 1.5 seconds. It now also deals 2 times the amount of damage to any frozen or chilled enemies. Finally, at level 5, its total cost decreased from 37,350 to 30,450, and its damage increased from 115 to 140, its cooldown decreased from 1.35 to 1.2, its slowness per hit increased from 60% to 80%, its max hits increased from 5 to 6, and its DPS went from 85.19 to 116.67. The freeze time was also reduced from 2.5 seconds to 1.75. It now also gains a frost shockwave, which activates every time it attacks. It does 20% of the SLEDGER's base damage and applies an extra 20% chill. If we consider this with its regular damage, it does 168 damage in total, or 140 DPS. Now that we've gone over all the stats, let's take a look at its uses and how good it is. Speaking of uses, use your hand to hit that like button and subscribe right now. I'm watching you. Anyways, because of its price, short range, and slow swing speed, I would not recommend getting it in the early game. You'll have to wait 2 waves to afford it, and it can't defend any waves by itself. However, if you are playing with other people, it can be a bit helpful, as it does take care of the abnormals and help out with heavies. Just make sure you have some other towers defending with it. You'll primarily find use for this tower in the mid to late game as a powerful stalling and crowd control option. When using it, try and get it to at least level 4, because that's when it starts getting pretty good. While it does gain the ability to freeze at level 3, it only applies 30% chill per hit and needs to get up to 60% to freeze enemies. Because chill gradually fades away, it struggles to freeze enemies by itself, especially bosses. The level 4 SLEDGER, however, applies 45% chill per hit and needs 65% to freeze, making it much more reliable at doing so every 2 hits. Not to mention, it also deals 2 times damage against frozen or chilled enemies at this level, making it much more effective at dealing damage. But when you can't afford it, you should try and get a max level SLEDGER as soon as possible, because that's when it gets seriously strong. It freezes enemies with every single hit for 1.75 seconds. Unfortunately, that's not enough time for it to be able to take advantage of its 2 times damage, as a freeze fades too quickly and all chilling disappears after they are thawed. As I mentioned before, if we consider both the aftershock and base damage, it does 140 DPS. For a total cost of 30,450 cash, that's a value of 4.6 DPS per 1k spent. That's not great, but remember, this tower can hit multiple enemies. Since it freezes and slows enemies, it often clumps them up, letting it usually hit a lot of enemies at a time. It has a hit limit of 6 at max level, and thanks to its stalling, it will often hit the max amount against a crowd in the late game. Still, I'm going to make a more tame estimate and say that it'll on average be hitting at least 3 enemies per swing. That boosts boosts its DPS up to 420, giving it a value of 13.79, which is incredible. And I want to emphasize that it will often hit way more than just 3 enemies. If it does reach the maximum of 6 enemies per swing, that's a DPS of 840, giving it a value of 27.59, which is unmatched by any other tower. But it gets even better. Remember, this tower deals twice the amount of damage against chilled or frozen enemies. While it can't take advantage of this by itself, remember, you can place up to 6 sledgers. So if you have all 6 sledgers placed and almost every hit damages 6 enemies that are chilled, you're dealing an extraordinary 1680 DPS for a value of 55.17. That value is just ridiculously high. That means your potential total max DPS with 6 sledgers placed is an insane 10,080 DPS. No other tower can come even remotely near this amount, making it potentially the strongest tower in the game. However, do remember that this is considering the absolute best case scenario. Enemies aren't going to be chilled every time you attack them, and you won't always be attacking 6 of them. But if you're playing on something like Badlands 2 and you're facing a wave absolutely spamming breakers, it's pretty reasonable to say you'll reach somewhere near this amount. Does this mean this is the new best crowd control tower in the game? Well, in terms of value and damage, plus its stalling, I'd say it's a contender. But do note that it is quite unreliable due to its short range and swing speed. Something like the mortar will more reliably chip down crowds due to its fantastic range. But now that we've looked at its damage, how does it do as a stalling tower? Well, it's actually really good. As you can see in these clips, the enemies are getting absolutely destroyed, barely being able to move. And because of its high pierce, you can immobilize some pretty big crowds. This allows your other DPS towers to deal with tanky but speedy enemies and gives them a lot more time to attack. After the Frost Blaster got nerfed, I say this is arguably one of the best stalling towers in the game. So it's a contender for best crowd control tower, amazing at stalling, and on top of all that, it has incredible value. There are a couple flaws though. First of all, as I have mentioned, it has a very short range and slow attack speed, making it unreliable. It also can't see hidden or flying enemies, but it does have lead detection. Overall, this tower has become extremely powerful, and considering the insane amount of damage it can deal against crowds, the decent single target DPS it has, the fantastic stalling it does, and its incredible value, I have to rank this as a solid S tier. If you're willing to spend the expensive 749 Robux, I'd actually recommend it. It'll be a great addition to your loadout as long as they don't nerf it. Anyways, that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments below if you're gonna buy this tower and whether or not you agree with my ranking. And if you enjoyed, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to join the Blue Head Mafia. Also, if you want to talk to me, consider checking out my Discord. We got some pretty cool features, like a custom party finder bot that will automatically pair you up with other people who are trying to do the same strategy. There's a link to the server pinned in the comments. And finally, I want to give a huge shout out to these channel members for supporting my content. If you want to add me as a friend on Roblox or get early access to some of my videos, consider becoming a channel member. It helps me out a lot and I really appreciate it. Anyways, that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.